"Are you glad?" she said. She asked it simply, looking at me over the cup, the morning steam between us. "That you stayed. That you chose this. All of it." My Playful Wife, Episode 30, Full Circle, written by Mia. A year is a full circle only in the sense that the calendar says so. The Earth goes around and comes back to the same place, and we call it a year, and we pretend the returning means something, that we, too, have come back to where we started, that the wheel has closed. But the Earth does not come back to the same place. It comes back to the same place in a galaxy that has itself moved on, so that the circle is never really a circle, only a spiral that looks like a circle if you don't have the instruments to see the drift. We had not come back to where we started. We had come back to the same morning, the same kitchen, the same October light at the same angle through the same window. And we were not the same, and so the morning was not the same, and the circle was a spiral, and the drift was the whole of the story. The October kitchen was the beginning. I have called it that all the way through, and it is true. There was a morning, 2 Octobers ago now, when I walked onto the balcony with a watering can in my hands, one version of a man, and walked back inside another, and everything I have written across 4 notebooks proceeds from that morning the way a river proceeds from a spring. And the October kitchen, 2 years later, was not an ending. I want to be careful about that, because the calendar tempts you toward endings, toward the tidy closing of the wheel, and I had let go of endings, had carried them down to the rubbish with the stool. It was not an ending. It was a marker, a place to stop and look at what had accumulated, the way Saloni stopped and showed a collection before going on to make the next, the way I stopped and filled a notebook before starting another. Not the end. Just, here is where we are. Here is what the spiral has made of us so far. I made tea at 7 on the morning of the anniversary. It was not a designated anniversary. Nothing had been named. There was no date circled, no occasion the world would recognize. But I knew the date the way I know my own birthday, in the body, without looking, the Tuesday in October when I had come in from the balcony with a watering can and sat down at this table and asked some ordinary morning question, had said good, and meant it, not knowing yet that I was lying, not knowing yet that the word would have to be unmade and remade across 2 years before I could say it again and have it be true. I knew the date. I had known it was coming for a week, the way you feel weather coming. And on the morning of it I woke before her, the way I do now, and came to the kitchen and made the tea. Saloni was asleep. She had been up late in the workroom. The 3rd collection pressing toward its December show, the deadline reel again, the old beautiful pressure. I let her sleep. I have become, over the years, a guardian of her sleep. It is one of the small offices of love I am proudest of, the keeping quiet, the chai made without clatter, the door eased rather than shut. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea and the small 4th notebook in the October light, the same light, the 7 o'clock October light coming in at the angle it comes in, at only in October, the angle that had been coming in 2 years before on the morning everything began. I sat in it a while before I wrote. I let it fall on my hands on the table, the same hands, 2 years older, that held a watering can and a plastic stool and a turban and a wife's face. And then I wrote. October. 1 year of this new life. 2 since the morning it started. The kitchen. This table. The same light. And then below it, because the 4th notebook is allowed to be true. What the year made, a woman I know completely and still do not know completely, and will be learning until one of us dies. A brother building something real in a far city, who calls now with no blade in it. A marriage that broke all the way open and, against every reasonable prediction, stayed open, that did not seal back over its wound, but learned to live with the wound in the light. A man who learned to watch. A man who learned to stay. The same light, and the eyes it falls on entirely changed. I put down the pen. I sat in the light a while longer and let myself go back. I do this rarely now, the going back, the deliberate return to that first morning, because the fourth notebook is about the present, and I try to live forward. But an anniversary earns a backward look, and so I let myself stand again, in memory, where it started. That October morning, 2 years gone, I had taken the watering can out to the balcony. The ordinary chore, the plants, the 7 o'clock light. I had been a man who believed his life was a settled and finished thing, married, employed, comfortable, asleep. I had believed I knew the dimensions of my wife the way I knew the dimensions of the flat. And then, in the space of a few minutes on a balcony, by a route I have written about elsewhere and will not retrace here, I had understood a thing that unmade all of it, that the comfortable life was a surface, that there were depths beneath it I had never once looked into, that the woman I thought I had finished knowing was an entire unmapped country, and that some of her country was, at that moment, on fire. I had come in from the balcony carrying the watering can and a wholly different life, and I had sat down at this table, this exact table, and she had asked me some ordinary morning thing, and I had said good. And it had been a lie. The first lie of the worst year. Good, I had said, with the bottom falling out of everything, because I did not yet have any other word, because I did not yet know how to say the true thing, because we had not yet built between us the language in which the true thing could be said. And here I was, 2 years later, same table, same light, same 7 o'clock October angle on the same hands. The distance between that good and this morning was the whole of everything I had written across 4 notebooks. The entire spiral, the drift that made the circle not a circle. That good had been a lie told by a drowning man. The gladness I would hand Saloni in an hour, when she came in and asked, would be true, would be every day, a thing built plank by plank across 2 years out of the wreckage the first good had tried and failed to paper over. Almost the same small container. Good. Every day, me too. But one of them empty and one of them full, and the filling of it had been the work of the whole 2 years. I was not sad sitting there. It surprised me a little. Every year it surprised me that the anniversary of the worst morning of my life arrived carrying no grief, or almost none, only a kind of vast, sober gratitude. The man on the balcony with the watering can had been certain his life was ending. He had been right and wrong. A life had ended. The sleepwalking one, the surface one, the comfortable, unconscious marriage to 1/10 of a woman. It had ended on that balcony, and I did not mourn it, because the life that grew up through its wreckage was so much larger and truer and more alive that mourning the old one would have been like mourning the seed for the sake of the tree. The seed has to go. That is not the tragedy of the seed. That is its whole purpose. I had been a seed, and the year had been the dark, wet breaking open. And this table, this light, this woman about to pad in on bare feet and ask me if I was glad. This was the tree. Saloni came in at 8. Hair undone, the particular dishevelment of a woman who has not finished sleeping but has decided to stop anyway, padding into the kitchen on bare feet in the October cool. She saw the tea I had made hers too, was keeping it warm, knew she'd be up by 8, and she saw me at the table, and she saw the small notebook open in front of me, and she read the whole thing off the arrangement of those 3 facts the way she reads everything. "You're writing early," she said. "Anniversary," I said. And I watched the understanding land, watched her do the same date arithmetic in her body that I had done, watched her arrive at the October morning 2 years gone, the watering can, the good that had been a lie. Her face changed. Not sad. Something graver and warmer than sad. She knew the date, too. Of course she knew the date. She had her own version of it, her own body memory of that October, the guilt pit she had described to me on a balcony, the back-to-back drowning. We had both been carrying this date toward this morning, separately, the way we had carried so much separately before we learned to carry it in the open. She poured her tea. Though I had made it, she liked to pour it herself, the small ritual, and she sat down across from me at the table. The table we had toasted. The table where a shaking man had once sat in the dark. The table where the whole thing had begun and had kept on beginning every morning since, freshly.
1 year, she said.
Meaning the same thing I had meant. 1 year of the new life, the life after the remaking, however you counted the calendar.
1 year, I said.
She wrapped her hands around the cup, both of them, for the warmth, the October chill still in the flat. The light moved on the table between us. The same light. I have said that so many times across these notebooks, the same light, and I mean it freshly every time. The physical fact that the sun returns each October to the same angle, indifferent to everything that has happened under it, offering the identical light to entirely different eyes.
Are you glad? She said.
She asked it simply, looking at me over the cup, the morning steam between us. That you stayed. That you chose this. All of it. Knowing everything you know now, the whole of it, the cost of it, are you glad? I thought about the question with the honesty it deserved, because she had not married me, the second time, the real time, for the comfortable answer. I thought about the cost. I did not pretend there had been no cost. The first notebook is the cost, written in a shaking hand. I thought about the watering can and the grill and the stool. And I thought about the rest of it, the chai at the right hand, the turban, the voice returned, the letters in their boxes, the held hand in the firelight, the phone passed across the kitchen, the 8 women blooming, the old man and his dogs, hello yourself, the whole vast accumulated ordinary miracle that the cost had bought. Every day, I said.
Not yes.
Every day, because gladness, I had learned, is not a verdict you deliver once about the past. It is a thing you renew in the present, every morning, freshly, like the staying itself, like the light. I was not glad once, 2 years ago, in a decision. I was glad this morning, again, choosing it again, the way I would be glad tomorrow morning, and the morning after, each gladness its own, none of them carried over, all of them chosen new. She looked at me for a long moment, the full gaze, the one that holds nothing back, the one I had not known she had until the year taught her to give it, and me to receive it. Me too, she said. 2 words, everything in them, the whole of her side of it, the guilt pit and the cloth and the back-to-back drowning and the slow climb and the gold silk and the singing, all of it folded into me too, the way our family folds everything into small words, good and try and hello yourself and now me too, the enormous things carried in the smallest containers we have. We drank our tea. That is nearly the end of what I have to tell for now in this telling. Outside, the city was doing what the city does. The October morning starting up, the horns, the dogs, the man somewhere below feeding his from a steel tiffin, the enormous ordinary life of the place resuming around us with no knowledge and no need of knowledge of the 2 people at the kitchen table marking, in silence over tea, the anniversary of a catastrophe that had turned, across 2 years and 4 notebooks, into the foundation of the best thing either of them had ever been part of. And there was more of it ahead. That was the other thing the anniversary held, alongside the looking back. The 3rd collection would show in December. Saloni would stand in another room full of people watching her work walk into the light, and I would be at the edge of that room, where I do my best living, watching the people watch. There was the opening in Bengaluru, the new office, my brother's expanding life. We would go, both of us as promised, and there would be a dinner with the four of us at a table in his city, and Mira would book the tickets for the next time before we'd left the first, the way she does. There were Diwalis ahead, and the lights along the railing, and Saloni's hands teaching Mira the order of the diyas the way her mother taught her. There were Tuesdays ahead, 10,000 of them. The chai and the singing and the collar and the look. There were notebooks I had not yet filled, a fifth and a sixth, and however many a life holds, the practice continuing, the days getting witnessed one at a time for as long as I was given days. None of it was an ending. That was the whole point. The thing the calendar's false circle could not teach, but the spiral could. There are no endings in the work that matters. Only the places you stop to look at what you've made before going on to make more. I had stopped somewhere in the 2 years, being a man who waited for his life to arrive, and become a man who knew it was already here. All of it, every ordinary, unremarkable morning of it, the only life I was going to get, happening now, requiring nothing of me, but that I be awake enough to see it. The seed does not come back and be a seed again. You get the tree, or you get nothing. I had the tree. I intended to spend the rest of my mornings standing in the shade of it, paying attention, which is the only prayer I know and the only thanks I have to give. The same season had come around again, the way seasons do, indifferent to narrative, caring nothing for anniversaries, offering the identical October it offered every year, but offering it this year to people who had learned at last how to receive it. That is the only thing that had changed, and it had changed everything. The light was the same. We were not. And the not being the same was not a loss of the people we had been. It was those people, kept and added to, deepened, drawn in ink and woven in cloth, made at last able to sit at an ordinary table in an ordinary light and know exactly what they were holding while they held it. Saloni finished her tea. She stood and came around the table and put her hand on the back of my neck for a moment, warm from the cup, the small proprietary touch, the sentence she says with her hands, and looked down at the notebook, at the words about the same light and the changed eyes, and she did not ask to read it because she did not need to anymore. There were no locked rooms, and a thing you can read any time you don't need to read right now.
"Come on," she said.
"The light's good. Don't spend it writing about the light. Come and be in it." She was right. She is almost always right about that, the difference between the entries you write and the ones you stand inside. I closed the notebook. I went and stood in the light with my wife on an ordinary October morning, 2 years from the morning that broke us open, in the kitchen where it all began and keeps beginning, and we did not say anything else, because there was nothing else that needed saying that the morning was not already saying for us. Different eyes. Same light. Still here. Still choosing it. Still, both of us, every ordinary morning for as long as the mornings last, choosing it. End of Volume 1, My Playful Wife.
Simbolo di copyright Mia.
All rights reserved. That was episode 30 of My Playful Wife. If this story is staying with you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus chapters are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.